more support for people to get into work, and we need to change the way job centres work altogether, in my view, and change the very nature of them, which is part of the work that we're doing. But I will take away the particular issue you put in terms of the minutes allocated and get a fuller answer to you.
Sorry, final question for me. You said just then you want to change the way job centres work. Do you want to just elucidate on what's in your mind on that?
Yeah, I don't think most businesses are advertising in job centres, and I think there's a basic mismatch between what is genuinely available in an area for those that are going to a job centre and that which they're being presented with. And I think it's a problem we've got to sort out. Okay. That is because people don't have faith in the job centres. Businesses don't, so you haven't got the job centre doing the job it's intended to do. I also want to, whether it's minutes allocated or whatever it is, I do think there's more support, and we've allocated money to support people into work, and that needs to be used much better in my view. In terms of the precise minutes allocated at face time or support time, I'm not across the detail of that, but I'm absolutely clear that we do need that more support. They're the two fundamental changes that are needed for job centres, to my mind.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister.
Liam Byrne, MP.
Prime Minister, thank you. You said at the top of the meeting that your vision for 3 years' time is that, in your words, I want people to feel better off. Just so we're absolutely clear, is the ambition that everybody in our society should feel better off in 3 years' time, including the poorest 40% of households?
Yes.
So you'll be aware of some quite troubling forecasts from, for example, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation that says that, in fact, having looked at all the measures that the government's announced on the table by the summer, the bottom 40% of households are not going to be better off in 3 years' time. They're actually going to be £1,200 a year worse off. So what do you think needs to change between now and the end of the Parliament so that everybody in our society is, in fact, enjoying higher living standards?
Well, we need to do a number of things. The first is we've got to get much better growth into our economy and create more wealth in the first place. And that's why we've put so much store on ensuring that we took necessary measures at the budget to deal with our inheritance. We then had a spending review which was targeted across the country. This question of making sure that if there is a thriving economy, it's a thriving economy in every part of the country and not just in some parts of the country. And it's why we've already in the spending review focused on things like the living wage, the national wage, and the minimum wage, and ensuring that wages are going up. They've gone up more in the last 10 months. They went up in the last 10 years. So that's the first part. The second part then is the poverty strategy that has to ensure that this is across the whole of society and every location, because in addition, as you all know, to the growth figures, we've had inequality variances across the country, place by place, and we have to have a laser focus on that, because whilst we want more wealth creation and the economy to thrive, and we do and we will, we can't have that as London and the South East and redistribution as a sort of one-word answer for the rest of the country. To my mind, that is fundamentally wrong.
Mr. Byrne.
The challenge that we've got, though, is that the Bank of England now forecasts that wage growth is going to slow down. Joseph Rowntree Foundation says that earnings for the bottom 40% are going to fall by £700 a year. The Office of Budget Responsibility says real household disposable income is going to fall to almost zero in a couple of years' time. Resolution Foundation says that the freeze on tax thresholds means that the real wage growth for the poorest will get obliterated. We've got council tax going up by 5%, food going up 4.5%, we've got energy bills up 10%, water bills up 26%, and Joseph Rowntree Foundation says that for those coming off fixed-term mortgages, they're going to be paying on average £1,400 a year extra by the end of this Parliament. Similarly, poor picture and outlook for renters. So we've got taxes and bills that are rising faster than wages. So the question remains, what else do you think is needed over the next year or two so that everybody is enjoying higher living standards by the time of the next election?
Well, if I just concentrate on two aspects of that. Firstly, the income side and then the cost side. On the income side, obviously, we have already pulled the lever of increasing minimum wages, which is on average, if I think about £1,400 extra into everybody in effectively 3 million of the lowest lowest paid, above inflation increases for standard rates of universal credit. And then on the other flip side, if you like, free childcare is coming on stream from this September across the board from 9 months through to school starting age. Free school meals are being rolled out, breakfast clubs are being rolled out, limits on what you have to pay on school uniforms, and warm homes discount is £150 per household. That's gone from 3 million to 6 million households for this winter. So I do think there are things that government has done and will continue to do. But in the end, the central focus has to be on creating more wealth and making sure that we have a growing and thriving economy. That's been the single biggest failure of the last 14 years, which is we haven't had an economy that has grown in any significant way.
These are all important steps forward, but having reviewed everything that you've just announced, the Resolution Foundation said that the poorest half of households, by the time of their next election, will still be £200 poorer than they were last year. So, the question remains, over and above what you've announced, what else do you think is needed in order that everybody in our society is enjoying high living standards in a couple of years' time?
I think we need a central poverty strategy, and we're putting that around the child poverty strategy, which we're rolling out in the autumn.
But you could cut people's taxes. I mean, if we taxed investment income in the way that we do work, if we tweaked up capital gains tax so that it was fairer, there would be enough money to deal with the fiscal pressures that we forecast and deliver a big, bold working class tax cut, just as they delivered in Australia. Surely that should be an idea that remains on the table going into the budget.
Well, I'm not going to be tempted to start speculating on what might or might not be in the budget. It's going to come in the autumn. We will get the forecasts. The Chancellor will set out her decisions according to that forecast, but I'm not going to be drawn into speculating on what that might be at this stage.
Well, Chair, the Prime Minister didn't rule that out, so I'll take that as a win and quit.
We're in for a long 6 months because no Prime Minister or Chancellor ever says in advance which of course we know. Every day there'll be a story saying doesn't rule out.
Okay, we absolutely, Prime Minister, we're very aware of that. Mr Barclay.
Thank you, Chair. Prime Minister, you've just been at pains to point out to Mr Byrne how much you're spending on different things. In May, the government had the second highest borrowing since records began, with only peak COVID in May 2020 being higher.
Sorry, I missed the middle word there, Steve.
I'm
so sorry.
In May, your government borrowed the second highest amount since records began, £17.7 billion you borrowed just in the month of May, and only peak COVID in May 2020 was higher. Do you expect borrowing this year to be higher or in line with forecast at the budget?
Oh, in line with forecasts, and there have been monthly fluctuations, usually for global reasons, as you'll have seen in a number of other countries. But we have also obviously got our overarching fiscal rules in place, which are ironclad, one of them relating to borrowing as a proportion of debt.
So tomorrow we will get both the June figure but also the figure for your first year in government of how much you've borrowed. You're expecting that to be in line with what was set out in the budget? Well,
I'll see what the figures are tomorrow, and there have been, I think every month this year there have been fluctuations, broadly driven, and I think generally accepted as driven by events that are happening globally, almost capable of being tracked to them day by day. But I want to be in line with the forecasts. We've got the fiscal rules in place to ensure that we are in line with the forecasts.
Well, the spending decisions you're talking about weren't global factors, they're national decisions. At the spring statement, the OBR found that there was a £14 billion deterioration in the fiscal forecast, the fiscal outlook from between the budget and the spring statement. Industry analysts are predicting a similar amount of deterioration ahead of the budget. Again, is that something that you would reject?
Well, my experience so far has been of different predictions almost on a weekly basis as we get into the final stages of the budget, which is why I think it's important to see them over a slightly longer term and see what precisely those forecasts are when we get to the autumn. And I don't say that frivolously. I was very concerned only a few weeks ago when the conflict in the Middle East looked like it was going to escalate rather than de-escalate. I was very concerned about the impact that would have on oil prices and on our economy as a result. And therefore, I do think it's important for us to see this over a slightly longer term.
I mean,
we're tracking it, as you'd
people
imagine,
would accept
very,
that
very
slight
closely.
variations. What I'm trying to tease out is whether there's a trend, and you're rejecting, for example, pretty widely accepted industry analysts that there's an expected further deterioration. For example, ING had predicted a further 14 billion. You're saying that's quite wide of the mark.
Well, let's see what the OBR's forecasts are in the autumn.
Right.
As I say, my experience is that those forecasts change on a pretty regular basis, often according to external factors, and trying to guess now what the forecast might be in the autumn is fraught with all sorts of difficulties.
Fine. In terms of consistency then, given other things change, is it reasonable to say, with regard to the fiscal headroom that you set out, that as a point of principle, you feel that there should be a reasonable amount of fiscal headroom?
Yes.
And you took measures to restore the headroom in the spring statement. Was that because the fiscal headroom you put in place at the budget was too insufficient?
No, I don't think so. I'd gently point out that the fiscal headroom we put in the budget was considerably more than the last government put in their last budget by some measure. But then there was a lot of fluctuation in the early part of this year, particularly with conflicts in different parts of the world, but also with the immediate after effects of the tariff decisions that were being taken, for example, in America, had an impact. And it was right, in my view and the Chancellor's view, that we retained the fiscal headroom.
Okay, so even though the headroom at the budget was insufficient and you, in my view, rightly took measures at the spring statement to restore it, the OECD are wrong when they said last month, again, pointing to how thin the fiscal headroom is. Again, you feel both industry analysis is incorrect, and you see warnings from the likes of the OECD as incorrect in terms of suggesting it is way too thin.
No, I'm not saying they're incorrect. I'm just saying I think it's important for us to look at it in the round and over the slightly longer period. I do think it's important to have that headroom, which is why we put it in the budget last autumn, and why in the spring statement we took the duty, to put that headroom back in, which is what we did.
The OBR found that of 21 forecasts that they have done since 2010, all but one of those was overly optimistic. Are you confident that the OBR forecast done at the budget will not be over-optimistic this time?
Well, I don't know. I mean, look, that's a matter for the OBR. They make the forecast. They're there for a purpose. And we obviously take what forecast they put in place and act accordingly.
Okay, what I'm interested in is decisions you have taken, for example, on welfare, where the IFS, I think, put the figure to over 3 billion, on winter fuel, where your own government figures put the cost as an additional 1 billion. There will be known pressures from decisions you have taken, which will be coming in the forthcoming budget. And what I'm interested in is the trend of a fiscal headroom which was insufficient, and you've already had to take measures to restore it. Warnings of that and warnings from industry. And again, without getting into writing a budget ahead of October, I'm interested in the trends and whether you're concerned.
No, I mean, I
am,
Stephen. You've been in this position preparing for budgets, and you will know the experience, which is that there are forecasts that, as you lead into a budget, begin in the end come on a weekly basis and fluctuate week to week, literally, and therefore. My experience of the budget and the spring statement is to focus intensely on the forecasts when we get them and prepare for them now according to our fiscal rules, which is what we're doing.
Well, you would accept that the size of gap we're talking about is more than mere fluctuations?
Well, look, back in the autumn, the OBR predicted one thing. By the spring, it predicted something else. By autumn, they will give their prediction going forward from there, and we have to work from that forecast.
But that's been consistent in a deteriorating line. That's the concern. It's not been fluctuating and getting better for some of the time. It's been consistently deteriorating.
Well, different forecast different things. Nobody forecast that we'd have the highest growth in the G7 for the first quarter of this year, but we did. And I'm pleased about that. And I think the measures we're taking can create the conditions in which we can improve on that in the autumn and the budgets thereafter.
Okay, so optimism, Prime Minister, for the future as well.
Of course.
Okay, thank you very much. Dame Caroline Dinage.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Prime Minister. 86% of charities say that they are seeing an increased demand for their services. Meanwhile, fewer people and fewer corporations are actually donating to charity and their overheads are going up. What's your government going to do to support charities?
Well, it is important. I think over half of the charities have been exempted from the national insurance rises. We are looking at what we can do on sort of business rates, etc., for charities and put in the support that they need.
That's it.
Well, there's probably other things as well, and I'll write to you with further stuff.
I mean, you say that half of charities have been exempted from the national insurance contributions, but there are 44,000 registered charities that have an income over £100,000, and the National Council for Voluntary Organisations reckons that the next increase is going to put their payments at 1.4 billion. You know, these are the organisations that you said when you came into this room, you said tackling poverty is central to everything we do. These are the organisations that are doing just that in our constituencies. They're tackling poverty on the ground, they're feeding people, they're running hospices. Your next hike is one of the causes of the decline. 30% of them say they're cutting staff. Isn't it time to offer just a blanket carve-out to charities?
No, I don't think it is. But in terms of the point you make about charities in all of our constituencies working hard in these areas, I completely accept that. And one of the things that we launched last Thursday was the Civil Society Covenant, where we got many, many thousands of charities together and did what we promised in opposition, which was to bring the government and the charities together in a partnership through that covenant and demonstrate to them the sort of work that we can do together. I have to say, they felt that that was the first time it had ever happened with a government prepared to work with charities in that way. It was a very good thing, very, very well received, and an example, to my mind, of the sort of partnership working we're going to have in this country. We're going to bring around the change that we need to bring about in the speed we've got available, because we have to always remember we inherited both a broken economy plus broken public services. No government's inherited that combination for decades upon decades and decades and decades, and that's a very difficult working environment.
But you're now attempting to break our charities. I mean, just this month, Marie Curie Hospice in Liverpool closed their inpatient unit permanently. Your civil society covenant won't put charities on a good financial footing by itself. You need to offer them a carve-out for this national insurance rise. I mean, quite simply, it is breaking them. 30% of them say they're cutting staff. Only 50% of them now feel positive about the future, Prime Minister. Can't you do something?
Well, it is important just to bear in mind why we had to do what we did on national insurance. We looked through the books and we found £22 billion missing. And we had to do something about it because that's a serious problem.
But you can't do that on
we addressed that at the budget. At the same time, we used the money from that NICS increase to invest hugely in our NHS. Hence, we promised 2 million extra appointments in the first year of Labour government. We've done 4.5 million. That takes the pressure off many charities.
I want to talk about charities, and you're basically balancing the book on the back of things like children's hospices. Can I also talk about...
we're clearing up the mess of the last government.
On the back of children's hospices. Charities also depend upon individuals giving generously. Do you know which is the most generous constituency in the country?
No.
It's Sheffield Hallam. 1.9% of income of the
congratulations to Sheffield Hallam. That's
I know, great, right? Do you know which are the least three generous? The least three generous are Kensington and Bayswater, Chelsea and Fulham, and Holborn and St Pancras, Prime Minister, each at around about 0.5% of their income, about half of the average of the country as a whole. Now, we know that you and your colleagues aren't adverse to being on the receiving end of little bit of philanthropic giving. How would you persuade people in wealthy areas like yours just to dig a bit deeper?
That's the first time I've been presented with those figures, but clearly in Holborn and St Pancras and other places we need to up our game, and we will do so.
So have you got a plan to promote philanthropy?
Well, the first I hadn't seen that readout of figures by constituency before.
Not just in your constituency, across the country. What can we do to encourage corporations and individuals just to support charities a bit more?
I think we should do everything we can to get them to support charities and individuals.
Like what? Everything we can, like what?
Well, we'll go to Sheffield Hallam and we will find out what's happening there that clearly isn't happening in Holborn and St Pancras, and take it away as a learning experience.
Is this something your civil society covenant might be looking at?
Yes. I think one of the most important things is how government works with charities supporting what they do. We've had examples of charities rolling out particular initiatives that they've brought to us. So one of them was the Macmillan initiative on giving people guided support to the charities that they might need if they're diagnosed, in that particular case with cancer, but with other diagnoses. They did that as a local plan. We've taken that now as a nationally rolled out plan working with those charities.
Very, very good.
And that's an example
Excellent.
of the
Good
covenant
example.
working together.
Can I move you on to the BBC? Because that's a bit of a regressive tax in itself, the licence fee. What's your view on how it might be reformed, and also